Hello, Internet. This video is going to be a bit longer than normal, I think, but it's because I asked you guys if there was any topics you wanted me to discuss, any questions you had for me, and I put them all in this video. So, hope you guys enjoy. I'm really excited about it. I've always wanted to do a Q&A video, but never felt like I had the following where it would be worth it. So, this is super exciting for me. It's a great way, I think, to, connect with you guys on a way that it's not just talking on Discord or you watching my videos. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Let's get right into it. So for the first topic, we have one from Malik Childish, and he said, "Need the motivational conversation over a gameplay to return." Well, I got you. Let's do it. So here's a run of Balatro that I did recently. I'll let this play while I answer all these questions and go over these topics. For anyone who doesn't know, this is what I used to do on my channel for a long time. This is how I started making YouTube videos. I would just, play some gameplay, rant about, problems I'm having in my life, mental health issues, things that are on my mind. And that was the inception of this channel. The whole point of this channel is on a weekly basis, I upload a video to basically archive my brain and just kind of make a record of where I was at the time that I recorded the video. I was a big fan of different commentary channels, and I really liked that style of the gameplay and conversation, but as I progressed making YouTube videos, since this is a very personal channel and a personal project that I'm gonna basically pursue my whole life, I decided that I wanted to make it more personal. I decided to show my face. I decided to, talk about music a lot more because that's a big part of my life. I wanted it to be a little bit more of a literal documentation of what was going on the week that I'm making the video. So that was why I decided to depart away from this style of video. I still really like making this style of video, but I think overall it makes more sense for me to do face cam and record that way for most of my videos because that's how I want to document my life. But yeah, I know a lot of my OG viewers really liked those videos, so maybe I'll pepper them in throughout time, but I would say don't expect me to fully pivot back to this style, at least for a while. Okay, so the second topic is from Christopher Zen, and he said, "How to stay enthused about making music after you realize you can't make a living from it, or even how to find time to." Now, this is a really big topic, something I talk about a lot on my channel, something I think about all the time. I'm going to try not to, make this too long of a response, but I have a lot of things to say about this. I think that if the goal of you making music, or anything creative really, but specifically for this, if the goal of you making music is to make a living from it, and you don't succeed in doing that, and that was your purpose in making music in the first place, I would say there's no shame at all in stepping away from making it. If that was if that was your goal and you didn't succeed at your goal and you don't feel like you have it in you to keep trying to reach that goal, just take a step back. It doesn't mean you have to quit forever. Maybe down the road, you'll think of a way to make a living that actually makes sense and works for you a little bit better, and you can pick it back up then. But if the whole purpose of you creating something is to make money, I don't think that's a really good way to go about it in the first place. But if you're really passionate about creating and making music, and making a living from it was just a bonus, then just, you can still take a break from it, but I would say go back to what inspired you to start making music in the first place. Like, what artists were you really into when you first got into making music? What got you excited about creating, when you were younger? However old you were, it doesn't matter. Just go back in time, try to reflect on the headspace that you were in when you first started creating and when you were super excited about creating. Maybe even go back and listen to some music that you made, like early on. And I promise you that'll give you inspiration and it'll give you a sense of direction moving forward because you'll realize how far you've come. Even if it's only a year or a couple years, a lot can change with an artist when it comes to creative ideas and execution. If you're working on something for a long time, it's really gonna add up. And in the moment, you might not notice it, but when you reflect, you're gonna realize how much has changed and how much progress you've made. And as far as having time or not having time to make music, unfortunately, that's just a reality of life for most people. Most people have to have jobs. Most people have to work to make a living. A lot of people have families that they have to take care of. They have, obligations in their daily life that they can't just ignore and just focus fully on making music. So that's just a reality of life, unfortunately. I don't really know what else to say besides try to find time when you can, or, just prioritize your real life over art. I always say that, like at the end of the day, being an artist is a beautiful thing. Creating art is one of the best experiences that you can have on earth, in my opinion. But you're still just a regular person. You're still just someone that has to get by on a day-to-day basis. So that's always going to take priority for me personally. That's always going to take priority over making art. I'm not willing to fully sacrifice lots of things in my life, get rid of my comfort, get rid of my income, get rid of my relationships just to make music. I think that's really stupid. So yeah, hopefully that helped. All right, for the next topic, we have one from Impulse Raps, and they said, the difficulty of being consistent and falling out of routine trying to get back to it. Now, this is huge. Any creative knows that you have to have some sort of consistent practice in order to improve, in order to get better at what you're doing. And falling out of routine can be really tough. I have this problem in my regular life outside of art. I like to be on a schedule that I create to the best of my ability that makes sense to me. It works with my life. And falling out of that routine can be really hard because, inertia. When you have momentum going, it's easier to keep it going. But once you stop, it's really hard to get it back to where it was. And I don't know what type of music this person makes. I'm assuming based on their name, they make rap music. But I would say try to find some sort of structure that you can repeat, at least in the beginning, just to get rid of a lot of thinking. Like, I've never been one to have a template, but maybe make a template for making beats. That's a good example, so that when you open up, your DAW, you don't have to think. You can just start doing stuff. You don't have to set anything up. Same thing with writing songs, like maybe just stick to a simple structure of songwriting in the beginning just to get the juices flowing, just to kind of input information into a structure that already exists so that you don't have to come up with this big idea. That can be very intimidating, like, oh, I have to make something that's cool and that's different and that's like different from what I'm normally do and different from what people are used to listening to, and it's still interesting and makes sense. Like, that can be very overwhelming if you're experiencing writer's block or any sort of creative block. So I would say, at least in the beginning, try to do things that are simple and easy and pretty structured, just so that you can get that momentum going again. And then maybe that'll be all you need to propel you to keep going, build up inertia, and then you'll find new ideas the further along the path you get. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the next topic is from Corin Mangal374, and they said, opinion on 5 to 10 posts a day type of advice for musicians to get their posts and music out there. I know it's true, but it just doesn't feel artsy like back in the day when SoundCloud you can drop and be discovered, not have to post your song 5 times a day to be seen. I like to post, but the distance between posts almost makes them more of a post, if you know what I'm saying. Now I can't do that because I need to feed the algorithm 3 to 5 times a day. So the first thing I'll say about this is don't worry about being mysterious if nobody knows who you are. The only artists that people like when they're mysterious are people that already have a following and they've already put stuff out that people care about. So that gives them a pull without them having to do anything. A classic example is like Frank Ocean and Playboi Carti. They're not super active on social media. They don't put music out all the time. And, they have this mysterious aura to them. But that's only because they're already popular and they've already made a name for themselves. So if you're really trying to do something with your art and, be a famous artist that people care about, you have to put yourself out there regularly. I get what you're saying about, distance between posts makes it seem more like a post. And this is all dependent on the platform, right? So when it comes to TikTok, I don't think there's much to TikTok that's like you can really make it worth doing outside of just like feeding the algorithm. That's just my opinion. So don't worry about trying to make artsy posts on TikTok. I mean, there's ways to do it, but I've never found a way to do it for my stuff personally. But when it comes to like YouTube and Instagram, you can definitely do like less frequent hard posts on your grid and less frequent videos on your channel. but still post reels and YouTube shorts every day. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then the hard posts, those are going to feel more special. And then the reels are just for the algorithm. The YouTube shorts are just for the algorithm. Does that make sense? Now, you mentioned SoundCloud too. Back in the day, I had a song that popped off on SoundCloud. It got like over 100,000 plays. But the only reason that it got so big is because other people reposted it. So there's always going to be this element of other people kind of needing to co-sign you in order for you to get more views and more plays and more success and all that stuff. Like, if you think about any artist that you like, there's probably a moment in their career where somebody co-signed them, somebody reposted their music or something in order to get more eyes on what they're doing. So that's just part of being a creative person, is other people have to be a fan of you in order for you to get anywhere. Like, that seems obvious, but it's not really something that people think about all the time, because there's this idea that you can just be this like brooding, mysterious artist in your room, just creating your masterpiece and then sharing it with the world, and everybody just magically finds it and loves it because it's so good. Somebody told me a while ago, making good music is not a brand. Like, you can't just brand yourself as I make good music. Nobody will care. That's just the reality of the world that we live in. So if you really want to post all the time, then you're going to have to keep doing it. And I would say, don't wait until you have something to share to post. Like, you can just post whatever, as long as it aligns with what you are willing to put out on the internet. Like, don't post stuff that's trendy and you don't like and you don't care about just to put your face out there. I wouldn't suggest that. 5 to 10 times a day is definitely way too much. 3 to 5 times a day is, in my opinion, still way too much. I would stick to 1 to 2 times a day, even like 5 times a week at the beginning, just to get it going, and then go from there. Figure out what you like, figure out what works. More importantly, figure out what other people like. When it comes to your art, just make what you want to make. Don't worry about what other people think. But when it comes to content and trying to get yourself out there, you kind of have to, you have to post what people like so that they find you. So I would say just experiment with that and see how it goes. All right. The next topic is from Brenya Shea. And they said, do you have any go-to resources that you'd recommend for a beginner producer or songwriter? Or any beneficial educational materials you suggest, whether it's a book, video series, or online course? I'm looking to teach myself, but there's so much content out there that it feels a bit overwhelming sometimes. Okay, so I don't have any like specific things to recommend, but what I would say, especially if you're a producer songwriter, get familiar with all of the major and minor scales. There's definitely many ways that you can go about doing this. Basically get to a point where if a song is playing, you can sit on a keyboard or whatever instrument that you play, and you can play along with it just by listening to it. That is a huge, huge, huge leg up for someone who's making music. Just having that much familiarity with like the language of music. Like, you can get very far without knowing music theory. I'm not saying that you have to know this stuff in order to get further, but when it comes to actually creating music, I suggest people familiarizing themselves with keys and chords and chord progressions. So I would say just spend as much time as possible learning those and practice playing along to other songs, because that's going to train your ear to hear things better. And then that'll make it easier for you to translate your ideas when you're writing your own music. Another thing that I would do, that I still do often to this day, is watch interviews or podcasts or whatever with artists that you're a fan of or that you're interested in. Because it's one thing to like the art that people make. It's another thing to learn where it comes from. And I think that's a lot more important than just trying to replicate a sound. Like, understanding why an artist makes what they make will help you understand why you make what you make. And it'll inspire you to try to make things because of the way you want to make them. I think that that's like a very important resource for people that are, making music, making art, is listening to as many interviews and podcasts and whatever as possible. it doesn't even have to be with an artist that you're a huge fan of. Like, there could be an artist that's out there that's really popular. A lot of people like them. Maybe you don't dislike them. You're just not super tapped in. But I would still listen to an interview with them because you're going to understand why things are moving in the direction that they're moving. And that might give you some information to reference for when you're making your own music. That's huge in my opinion. So I would say those are the two most important things when it comes to being a beginner producer and songwriter. All right, so the next topic is from DT38679, and they said, I've been thinking a lot about the sense of free will when creating. I'm drawing inspiration from Rick Rubin's view on creativity being a universal human flow that manifests in someone. If you don't act as the medium for it to come into existence, though, it will come through someone else. Do we get to decide which part of this universal creative output of all of humanity we get to create at a given time? Is true art a reflection of our life while giving up control of our ego? Or is art truly crafted with talent? Or is it some mix of the two? Would love your thoughts. Well, I would love to give my thoughts, so here we go. Now, obviously, I don't know Rick Rubin personally. I don't know exactly what he thinks, but I think he would agree with me when I say everything that he's saying is just for the purpose of inspiration. Everything that he would say is the only reason he's saying it is to inspire people to make art how they think that they should make art and how they want to make art and to try to find their core essence and translate it into art. So however you can get to that place, I think is the right way, quote unquote, to do it. Now, I do agree that ideas exist and sometimes someone else will create something that you thought of. That's happened to me a lot where I'll find something out. You know, I had an idea and I'll find it later. I'll be like, oh, this is very similar to an idea that I had that I never acted on. But that's just because humans have a collective unconscious. That's not something I'm going to get into in this video, but to make it a little bit more literal, I think just don't think about too much of the process and just create, because that's how you're going to actually achieve all these things that you said. In order to, have the free will and tap into the universal creative output and let go of your ego and let your talent speak for itself without thinking, you're going to have to just create. The less thought that you put into it when you're actually making something, the more accurate it's going to come out in reference to all the things that you just said. So I think it's super important to get out of your own way and let the idea speak for itself and just act as a vessel and as a medium for it to exist in the world. Now, I know that's like super hippy dippy and weird or whatever, but I really believe that quality comes from quantity. And when I say that, I mean the more art and the more music you make, the better you're going to get at it and the more quality is going to come from it. Now, you might get to a point down the road where you've mastered your craft and everything you do is a banger. Most people are not going to be at that point. Maybe they can in the future, but they're not right now. So I really think that the more you create, the better you're going to get and the closer you're going to get to making what you actually want to make. Now, it doesn't mean you have to put everything out that you make, but even if you make 100 songs and you put out 10 of them, those 10 are probably going to be super solid. Not saying the other 90 are bad, but you had to make those other 90 songs to get to the 10 that are just like absolute bangers by your standards. Now, people perceive things differently than you do. So just because you think that they're really good doesn't mean other people will. So there definitely is value in putting out more music than, just 10%. I personally am trying to go back to thinking this way in the future. I want to put out more music, even if I'm not like, I'm trying not to get too caught up in the idea of what's good and what's not before it's out. And I'm trying to just let the songs speak for themselves. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just make as much art as you possibly can. Make as much music as you possibly can. Don't think too much about what you're doing. Just fill up a folder and then go back and see where you're at. And just keep repeating that process over and over. And I promise you, you will start to make stuff that you love. All right, we got two more topics. The next one is from Mord Christ. And he said, one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is how I'll obsess over my mix, but then I'll listen to other songs where the mix isn't that great and find that the mix has very little impact on whether I like the song. Why is it so hard to give myself grace on a mix? In a similar vein, sometimes the artists, producers we compare ourselves to are just unrealistic. I shouldn't get down on myself because the beats I'm making in my garage don't sound like the beats 40 is making in his $1 million studio. I feel like arrangement isn't talked about much on YouTube. That could also be a cool idea to touch on. So the first thing I'll say is people who've watched my channel for the past, 6 months or so, I put out a video called You Don't Need to Mix Your Music. I think that video covers a lot of how I feel about that. Basically, as long as you think it sounds good and other people think it sounds good, even if it's not like perfect, I don't think it matters all that much. But if you hear your song having a good mix, you have to figure out how to make that happen. I would argue that you could make songs that sound just as good as 40 in his $1 million studio in your room. Maybe not like recording vocals and stuff, like if you have like music equipment, but you can definitely make beats that sound super clean without that much equipment. That's very achievable. But overall, I think comparing yourself to other artists is a slippery slope. I do it all the time, and it's never really benefited me. There's definitely ways that you can do it in a more healthy way. Like if you're growing with a group of artists and they're your friends, they're your peers, I think it's a little bit more acceptable and actually beneficial to compare yourself to them. Not necessarily do what they're doing, but use them as a reference as opposed to like some artist that's already super famous and has a lot of money and a lot of views and a lot of followers, and like comparing yourself to them doesn't really make sense, like logically, so I would say if you have peers that you make art with or like peers that you talk to about art, I would say reference them over other famous artists first. Also, in the next couple weeks or so, I'm going to make a video all about arrangement. So I won't go too into detail now, but what I will say is steal arrangements fully. Like, I'm not talking about sampling. I'm not talking about taking the same chord progressions or the same melodies. I'm talking about the actual arrangement of a song or the song structure of the song itself. Just fully steal it. And then you can sort of do like a paint by numbers thing where, all right, so there's a 4-bar intro, and then there's a verse that's 8 bars, and there's a hook that's 8 bars, and there's a bridge that's 4 bars, and there's a verse that's 8 bars. Just figure out your way to like write that down and then just copy it completely, because you're not going to get sued for copying the form of a song. That doesn't make any sense, because if that was the case, everyone who does intro, verse, chorus, outro would get sued. But like, who made that up? You know what I mean? It's a little bit trickier when it comes to chord progressions because they're a little bit more identifiable, especially to people who aren't as familiar with music. But I would say if you're thinking about arrangement, listen to other songs and just fully steal how they arrange the song and make it your own. Don't use the same chords, don't use the same tempo, don't use the same instrumentation. Just use the amount of layers and the actual structure of the song and make your own version of it. I think that's a really good exercise for artists, especially if you're in some sort of like creative block. It's really benefited me in the past. I've done it with songs in the past and no one's ever even known that I've done it. So yeah, I would say give that a shot. Okay, we've made it to the final topic from Daisy Rush Stream. And they said the impact of internet technology on the cognitive activities. Now, I don't think it's a hot take to say that technology benefits people, but it also negatively affects people. I'm sure you've seen these recent articles about ChatGPT and how it's basically like turning our brains into mush. Yeah, I mean, there's a balance to everything. And I think that going full on head first, 100% immersion into a new technology is probably never a good idea because, we don't know enough about it. We don't know how it's going to impact us. But integration of technology into daily life is completely unavoidable, especially when it comes to art and creative ventures. I always use these examples where when auto-tune first became a thing, everybody hated it because they were like, you're not actually singing. And a lot of people thought that real singers were going to lose their jobs because of auto-tune, because now anyone can sing. But then what we learned is that auto-tune is a specific style. People use pitch correction on recorded records and live. Everybody does that now. But there's still people that don't. And there's still people that do it in a way that you don't even know that they're doing it. And there's people that do it in a way that you do know that they're doing it. All these things exist now. You know, when recorded music itself was first invented, people thought that no one was ever going to go see live music again. People thought that live musicians were going to lose their jobs because, you know, it's all about like the economy and like careers and the job marketplace. And I think like if you're really considering a piece of technology and the only thing you're considering is its relation to having a job, I think you got to take a step back because that's really silly. You know, like with the rise of AI, obviously there's environmental factors that are happening with the current state of AI that I don't think are good. But AI in itself is going to be integrated into music and art whether we like it or not. It's going to be just like everything else. It's a new piece of technology that people will learn to use, and they'll figure out a way to make it make sense for them, and either people will like it or they won't. And that's really how simple I see it. I think now is a really great time to make your art as human as possible because that's what's really going to make it stand out in the future, if that makes sense. And that's all the topics. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I definitely want to do these more. If you want to just stay engaged with the channel in general, the best way to do that would be to join the Discord. Link for that is in the description. And as always, I put out a new video every Sunday. So if you like this video, you can come back next week for a new one. And I will see you then.